This is me, Chapter 19, reviewing the sectional struggle. Let's get started. What are the results of the Mexican War? This 17-month war is going to cost $100 million. That was real money back then. And over 13,000 lives lost, mostly to disease. New territories, 100 million square miles of new land. When you add Texas is brought into the Union, which are going to be organized into territories and states, that's going to make slavery the central issue in national politics. The new territories will upset the balance of power between the North and South, particularly in the Senate. The House already had Northern dominance. The South, though, is where the Southerners will be able to hold on. The war also created two Whigs who will run for president, and Manifest Destiny will be partially realized. So the Free Soil Party is also going to be formed. The reason this is important, it's going to have an impact in the 1848 election, and also have an impact of the birth of a new party later on, be part of the birth of the Republican Party. What was their platform? Free soil. That means free states. Free speech. Again, against the gag rule in the House or in the Congress. Free labor, of course, anti-slavery. And free men. Who became free soilers? You have these bond burners, discontented Northern Democrats. That's going to be their nominee. A former Democratic president in 1848, which will be Martin Van Buren. Anti-slave members of the Liberty and Whig parties are going to become free soilers. And those that are opposed to the extension of slavery into new territories are going to become free soilers. And that's going to be their main uniting feature. Why do they want to stop the expansion of slavery into new territories? Because eventually they want slavery to die out. So here are the results of the 1848 presidential election. You see Zachary Taylor. It's pretty close. And if you look at Van Buren, he probably was the spoiler. Had 10% of the popular vote. Didn't get any electoral votes, but I'm not sure if you look underneath the hood there, he made the difference in some of these states. Well, around the same time and right after that, gold is going to be discovered at Sutter's Mill in California, which is going to be just east of Sacramento. And this is going to result in the gold rush of 1849. The 49ers. No, not the football team. The football team's named after them. The 49ers are going to head west and search for gold in the Sierra Nevada region, or just west of that, east of San Francisco, Sacramento, and Stockton, if you look at the map there. That's the area. And we're going to see San Francisco emerge as a major city in a very short period of time. And here's another map you can pause and look at a little bit more closely. All the different sea links and transportation. You can pause this map. You can look at the different mining centers throughout the country and look at the explosion, the discovery of gold, mostly, and silver in the western part of the United States. Or these territories, not the United States yet. One of the things individuals would do, looking for luck, would be prospecting. They would go out to certain areas and pay people to mine in areas, and hopefully you'll find gold. Some placer mining. There's another photograph of miners. Doesn't look too fun. Quartz mining. Couldn't find gold. You work for someone to get quartz, using a lot of different products at the time. So these mining booms and discoveries. Silver in Nevada. Lead and silver in Leadville, Colorado. Gold in Colorado. Gold in the Dakota Territory. And copper in Montana. People are moving west. And here's a couple paintings of early San Francisco. See how small it is in the 1850s. In less than 10 years, 300,000 people had traveled the Oregon and California trails to the Pacific coast. And again, the main hub, because of the bay, is going to be San Francisco. Here's a map of 1821 after the Missouri Compromise was agreed to and what things looked like at that time. You can pause to look at that. And in the 1840s and 50s, you're going to see much more land added with the annex of Texas, the Mexican Cession of 1848 that ended the Mexican War, and then in 1853, the Gadsden Purchase. And as you know, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, Mexico's going to cede the Mexican cession to the United States, which is basically going to be northern Mexico. The Rio Grande River boundary is going to be between the U.S. and Mexico, is what the United States wanted initially. And then the U.S. is going to pay Mexico $15 million for people having to move and other things with the pay for part of the cession. And again, here's a more expansive map of territorial growth to 1853. Also, at the time, you're going to start seeing some exercise of the Monroe Doctrine, where the United States is going to try to have influence in Honduras, Nicaragua, and Cuba, and, in Mexico during the war. It's depicted here as American raids, attempted raids into Latin America. So, what's going to be needed here, again, is another compromise to deal with the problem of the expansion of slavery in the territories. Because very quickly, in 1850, California, a huge prize, a huge state in terms of territory, is going to apply for statehood. Because of the gold rush, they're going to be ready very quickly. So it's going to cause a problem. So Henry Clay, again, the great compromiser, he's going to introduce this, but his health is failing. The person that's going to take up the slack and pass the Missouri Compromise in separate bills is going to be Stephen Douglas. So you have Clay, Calhoun, Webster, and Stephen Douglas. They're going to propose this compromise. Well, it's the most intense debate in United States history. Calhoun, John C. Calhoun, believed the North should honor the Constitution and enforce the fugitive slave law. The South wanted California. If you look at the Missouri Compromise and look at that line, well, they should be getting most of California. They threatened to secede from the United States if they didn't get their way. Calhoun also believed the United States should have two presidents, one from the North and one from the South. Yeah, I don't know how well that would have worked. Daniel Webster, who's standing there speaking, said that succession is impractical and impossible. There's no separating here. How would we split the land? How about the military? He said the only answer is to compromise at all cost and preserve the Union. So those are the principles of Calhoun and Webster. Well, what does the compromise look like? California is going to be admitted as a free state. But a new fugitive slave law, a pretty aggressive one, is going to be passed. That's going to make Calhoun and the Southerners happy. The slave trade will be abolished in Washington, D.C., a little concession by the southern states. Douglas is going to get in his little thing here. Popular sovereignty is going to determine slavery in the Utah Territory and the New Mexico territories. We'll see this on the map in a second. And then there's a border dispute between Texas and New Mexico areas. It's going to be resolved, and with that resolution, Texas is going to get $10 million for the northwestern land that was considered part of the Texas Territorial Republic. So let's look at Stephen Douglas. He was a United States Senator from the state of Illinois. He believed the only way to solve the slavery issue is with popular sovereignty. What is popular sovereignty? Let the people in each territory decide through the process of voting whether they want slavery or not. Let the voters decide. Popular sovereignty. It means the popular will of the people is the sovereign will rule. Along with Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, and John C. Calhoun, again, they proposed this compromise of 1850, and again, California is a free state, enforce a new fugitive slave law, popular sovereignty in the Utah and the Utah territories, and stop the slave trade in Washington, D.C. So there's Utah Territory, Mexico Territory in 1850. California admitted as a free state, 1850. See a little red dot in the District of Columbia. Slave trade is ended. And there's all of your slave states in green. Free states or territory in the gold. What was the fugitive slave law? The abolitionists were apoplectic about this. They denounced it because they're now, under federal law, required to, if they see slaves, they're supposed to give them up so they can be returned to their owners in the South. At this time, in response to the fugitive slave law, Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin is going to be published, where it humanizes slaves for the first time in a book. Abolitionists will openly refuse to enforce the law. The Underground Railroad, because of this, will become more active. Here's some responses to the fugitive slave law by abolitionists. You can pause and look at this. Pretty intense with Emerson and Garrison. The Southerners are going to respond, and with the reaction of the abolitionists and the Northerners, they're going to threaten to secede from the Union and go to war over this if it's not enforced. They believed it should be enforced because the Constitution of the Fifth Amendment protects property, and the Supremacy Clause that states that federal law is over state law. Now you can pause and look at these reward ads in newspapers for runaway slaves. So the Fugitive Slave Act had some pretty drastic effects. It created open hostility towards slavery in the North, caused many to openly disobey the law. More violence erupted over the issue of slavery. It's going to become more intense now. It's not just arguments. It's going to start getting violent. It's going to increase the activity of the Underground Railroad. There's another map to look at expansion. You can pause to look at that. Another one that shows the expansion of railroads. In green is railroads in operation in 1850. Within 11 years, in red, railroads added by 1861. It's quite an expansion, but notice the vast majorities in the North and the Midwest, or in the West. South, not so much. So, the rest of the Louisiana Territory needs to get organized. And this is where the Kansas-Nebraska Act comes in. Well, the reason it needs to be organized and figured out is that Stephen Douglas is very much involved with Chicago as the hub. He's from Chicago, to build a transcontinental railroad connecting California to the East Coast, either in the south or north. Okay, you'd prefer to have it go through either the Nebraska or Kansas territory. He wanted it built in the north, but had to convince the south otherwise. Now understand, the rules were different back then in the 1850s. Douglas stood to make a lot of money if the Transcontinental Railroad was going to go in the north. Why? Because he would speculate on land, and of course those railroads would go through that land, so use your imagination and see how he can make money. Also, too, he wanted to have it in the north and also draw the Southerners into a compromise again. Why? Douglas wanted desperately to be elected president. And he believed if he was able to bring the North and South together again on another compromise of the Kansas and Nebraska Act, just like he was able to finish up the compromise of 1850, split them up in separate bills to help get that passed, because Henry Clay is going to be ill and eventually die. He's not going to be able to finish it. So this plan that he's going to propose, Kansas and Nebraska territories be opened up to slavery in turn for building the railroad in the north. It's not a guarantee of slavery, though. It's going to be decided by popular sovereignty. The people in the territories will decide to slave it free. And what this is going to do, guys, is going to turn, particularly Kansas, into an area that's going to have its own little civil war. It's going to become violent and pretty brutal. If you look at the map here, again, now with the Kansas-Nebraska Acts at play, this is where things stand at around 1854. And that's it. We'll get more into the violence in Kansas and other things as we move along here. And until next time, thank you.